The first time I noticed something was off was when my wife, Rachel, started working late every Tuesday and Thursday. It wasn't unusual for her job as a real estate agent to have evening showings, but the pattern seemed too convenient. After 10 years of marriage and two beautiful children, Emma, age 7, and Liam, age 5, I thought we had built something unbreakable. My name is Daniel, and I've spent my entire life building our family farm into something my grandparents would be proud of. 300 acres of prime agricultural land that's been in my family for generations. Rachel and I met right after college when she moved to our small town to start her career. She always complained about small town life but said she stayed because she loved me. At least, that's what I thought. The second red flag came during our family reunion last summer. My younger brother Jason, who had moved away to the city for work, returned home for the first time in almost 2 years. I noticed how Rachel's eyes followed him around the property, how she laughed a little too hard at his jokes, touched his arm a little too long. Something in my gut twisted when I saw them talking quietly by the old oak tree, their heads close together. Jason had always been the charming one, the brother who turned heads. While I inherited the family farm and responsibility, he inherited our father's easy smile and our mother's charisma. He visited maybe once a year, usually around holidays, and the kids adored their Uncle Jason. "Uncle Jason is so funny, Daddy," Emma would say, and something in her smile reminded me of him rather than me. I brushed these thoughts aside as paranoia, until I found the text messages. Rachel had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. A notification popped up. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, same place." It was from Jason. My hands trembled as I opened the message thread. 2 years. They had been seeing each other for 2 years, starting shortly after Liam was born. The messages were explicit, describing meetups at a motel just outside town whenever Jason visited, which was apparently more often than I knew. They mocked me, called me clueless, boring. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and was squeezing my heart until it burst. But one message stopped me cold. "Sometimes I look at them and wonder," Jason had written. "Emma has my eyes, don't you think? And Liam's smile is definitely mine." Rachel's response: "I've thought that too, but Daniel would never suspect. He trusts me completely." I put the phone down exactly as I'd found it and walked out to the barn. I screamed until my voice gave out, punched hay bales until my knuckles bled. Then I did something I'd never done before. I got calculating. Over the next 4 weeks, I moved like a man possessed by cold precision. I consulted with a lawyer who specialized in divorce and custody cases. I quietly collected DNA samples from my children, a strand of hair from each, and sent them for paternity testing. I installed small cameras in our living room and kitchen. I hired a private investigator to document Jason's visits to town. I contacted our bank and discovered Rachel had been siphoning money from our joint account into a private one, almost $30,000 over 2 years. Money that should have gone toward the farm, toward our children's future. Most importantly, I found the paternity test results had been sent to my secure email address. I stared at them for what felt like hours before finally opening them. Emma and Liam were not my biological children. I am ashamed to admit I wept that night, alone in my truck parked at the edge of my property, overlooking fields my family had tended for generations, fields I had intended to pass down to children who, as it turned out, carried my brother's blood, not mine. But I still loved them, God help me, I still loved them like they were my own, because in every way that mattered, they were. The final piece fell into place when Rachel mentioned that Jason was coming to town for the Harvest Festival. Each year our small community gathered at the town square to celebrate the end of growing season. Local businesses set up booths, there was a stage for announcements and awards, and nearly everyone in town attended. "He's just passing through," Rachel said casually over dinner. "Thought he'd stop by and see the kids." I nodded, already knowing from the text messages I'd been monitoring that they planned to meet at their usual motel after the festival. "Great," I said. "We should all have dinner together as a family." The day of the Harvest Festival arrived with perfect autumn weather. Rachel spent extra time on her makeup and hair, claiming she wanted to look nice for the community photos. Emma and Liam were excited about the carnival games and cotton candy. My brother arrived around noon, greeting me with a hearty hug. "Danny, man, it's been too long." "Has it?" I asked, patting his back. "Seems like you've been around more than I realized." He didn't catch my meaning, too busy giving Rachel a supposedly innocent hello kiss on the cheek that lasted a beat too long. The festival proceeded normally through the afternoon. The mayor was making his annual speech about community and tradition when I excused myself, telling Rachel I needed to check on something at our booth where we were selling organic honey from the farm's beehives. Instead, I walked directly to the stage. I had made a donation to the community fund that morning, substantial enough that the mayor had agreed to let me make a brief announcement. "And now," the mayor said, wrapping up his speech, "Daniel Carson would like to say a few words about this year's exceptional honey harvest." I took the microphone, scanning the crowd until I found Rachel and Jason standing close together near the back, my children, his children, playing nearby. "Thank you, Mayor Thompson," I began. "Our small town has always valued honesty, integrity, and family. Those are the principles I was raised with on the Carson family farm." The crowd nodded appreciatively. I could see Rachel's confused expression. I hadn't mentioned making any announcement. "Family is everything to me," I continued, "which is why today I need to share something important with all of you. My extended family, my community." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded documents. Divorce papers, paternity test results, bank statements, and hotel receipts, and held them up. For 2 years, my wife Rachel has been having an affair with my brother Jason. For 2 years, they have been stealing from our family farm and laughing behind my back. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Rachel's face drained of color. Jason took a step back. But the greatest theft, my voice breaking slightly before I steeled myself, was learning that my children, whom I have raised and loved with all my heart, are biologically my brother's children. I am not their father. I am their uncle. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Someone dropped a glass, and it shattered loudly in the sudden silence that followed my words. Rachel started pushing through the crowd toward me, her face contorted in panic. "Daniel, stop this right now," she screamed. "Every detail is documented," I continued, my voice carrying over the festival speakers. "Every secret meeting, every stolen dollar, every lie told." I turned to look directly at my brother, who seemed frozen in place. "Jason, you are served with a lawsuit for alienation of affection. Rachel, these are divorce papers citing adultery, financial fraud, and paternity fraud." I held up the documents. "And this USB drive contains video and text evidence that has already been filed with the court." Our local judge, Honorable Martha Winters, stepped forward from the crowd. This hadn't been planned, but I welcomed it. "Mr. Carson," she said, her voice stern but compassionate, "as someone who has known your family for generations, I find these allegations deeply troubling. If what you've presented is legitimate evidence, I can assure you my court will address this matter with the utmost seriousness." Rachel finally reached the stage, tears streaming down her face. "You can't do this. Those are your children." "Biologically they are not," I replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But I am filing for full custody because, while you and Jason were building your relationship on lies, I was the one reading bedtime stories, bandaging scraped knees, and teaching them about integrity." Judge Winters took the documents from my hand, reviewing them briefly before looking up with a grim expression. "Based on what I am seeing here, I am issuing an emergency temporary order. The children will remain with Daniel until formal proceedings can begin. Mrs. Carson, you are ordered to vacate the family home immediately, and Mr. Jason Carson is restrained from contact with the minors pending further investigation." She turned to the sheriff who had made his way to the front. "Sheriff, please ensure this order is enforced today." Rachel collapsed to her knees on the stage, mascara running down her face. "You can't take my children," she sobbed. "They're not just your children," I said quietly, no longer needing the microphone. "And according to the law, what you and Jason have done constitutes parental alienation and fraud." The sheriff stepped forward, gently helping Rachel to her feet while another deputy approached Jason, who had started inching toward the parking lot. Judge Winters banged her gavel. She had actually brought it to the festival for the pie contest, judging Orphan Casey, and the sharp crack silenced the murmuring crowd. This court hereby grants temporary full custody to Daniel Carson, effective immediately. A formal hearing will be scheduled for next week. Through tear-blurred eyes, I watched as Rachel was escorted away, her carefully applied makeup now streaked across her face, her body shaking with sobs. Jason stood rigidly as the deputy explained the restraining order, his face ashen and eyes darting, looking for escape. Emma and Liam huddled together near our booth, confused and frightened by the commotion. I would have to explain things to them, not everything, but enough. They would know they were loved, that they were still mine in every way that mattered. As I stepped down from the stage, our community parted like the Red Sea, some reaching out to touch my shoulder in support, others averting their eyes from witnessing such a private tragedy made public. But it had to be this way. In our small town, the truth would have come out eventually, and I wanted it on my terms. Judge Winters approached me, her voice lowered. "Daniel, I've known your family since before you were born. Your grandfather would be proud of how you've handled this, with dignity despite the circumstances. The court will factor in who has been the primary caregiver, regardless of biology." I nodded, too emotionally drained to speak further. As I walked toward my children despite what any DNA test said, I heard the whispers around me, saw the condemning looks directed at Rachel and Jason. The sheriff led Rachel toward his cruiser to escort her to collect her things from our home. Just before she ducked into the car, her eyes met mine across the town square, filled with a mixture of rage, shame, and disbelief. The fantasy she had built with my brother was crumbling before her eyes, exposed to the harsh light of truth and justice. The Harvest Festival, normally a celebration lasting well into the evening, was quietly dispersing. Parents gathered their children, vendors packed up early, and the previously festive atmosphere had turned somber. Our small town would be forever changed by what had transpired today. I reached my children and knelt down to their level, gathering them in my arms. They were confused, asking where their mother was going, why everyone was looking at us. "Everything's going to be okay," I promised them, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "We're going to go home now." As I stood with a child holding each hand, I caught sight of Jason being escorted to a separate police car, his head bowed in shame. Our eyes met briefly across the distance, and in that moment I saw the realization dawn on him. He had lost everything. His brother, his lover, his children, and his reputation. The look of devastation on his face would have brought me satisfaction if I weren't so empty inside. The judge approached me one last time before I left, handing me an official document. "This temporary custody order is effective immediately," she said. "The court date is set for next Monday at 9 in the morning. Based on the evidence you've provided, I don't anticipate any issues with making this permanent." I took the paper with a shaking hand. "Thank you, Your Honor." "And Daniel," she added, lowering her voice, "I've known your brother his whole life too. I never thought he was capable of this level of betrayal. The court will not look kindly on what he and Rachel have done." With those words hanging in the air, I turned and led my children toward our truck, away from the whispers and stares, away from the public spectacle that had just shattered the facade of our family life. The weight of the judge's words followed me. The court would not look kindly on what they had done. Neither would our community. Neither would I. As I helped Emma and Liam into their car seats, I heard Rachel's desperate voice calling my name from the sheriff's car, but it was too late for explanations or apologies. The truth had been revealed, justice was already in motion, and nothing would ever be the same again.